I retired when I was 50. And uh, and the reason I retired is because when I got involved in the television industry, it was new. And every day was like, whoa, there was something new and whatever. And then satellites and micro and all these things. And so it was very organic and you grow with it. So you know a lot of things you take for granted. You don't think about them. You just know them. The rest of the world doesn't know, but there's no reason for them to know because they're not in the business. So, but anyhow, when I retired, I had a computer. This is back in the early 90s. I had a computer, and every time I would touch the computer, it wasn't grounded, and none of the computers were back then, in home anyway, home type. And but every time I would touch my computer, it would crash, and meaning the software would glitch up, and then I'd have to shut it down, bring it back up, and pray that it would work. And the reason I was doing this is because um, when I retired, I ended up in Sedona, Arizona. Beautiful place, and it's like living in a national park and all that good stuff, and very outdoors, very earthy. And but anyhow, I was uh, but the biggest problem I had was keeping the computer to work certain times of the year because of the static electricity in the room. And that's what caused all of these glitches and stuff in the old days. So, but anyhow, one day I recognized what it was and I said, well, I'm just going to ground my computer. So I took a piece of copper tape and I laid it across the front of the desk in front of my keyboard and connected it to with a wire to an electrical ground rod. And then every time I would go to touch my computer, I would put my fingers on the tape and discharge my body, get the static electricity off my body. So then when I touched my computer, everything would work and no glitches. So that's first event. Second event was I went outdoors after that about an hour later and I sat down on a bench and I was in a tourist area down across a place called Tlaquepaque, which is across from where I was. And they had these big tour buses that kept, they would come up and drop off the tourists. And then they would go through all the tourist things and eventually have lunch and leave, I guess. But anyhow, so one day after this one event, I went out there and I was sitting on a bench, and up pulls this big old tour bus, and then all of a sudden you see all of the tourists getting off the bus in a single file row, and they all had big white Nike type tennis shoes, the athletic shoe, and I have no idea where it came from except that I was working with static, reducing that static on my computer. And I knew it was from the environment, the carpets, and all that stuff in that room. But anyhow, so I just asked myself, I wonder if there's a consequence to us humans no longer being naturally grounded. Now, nobody would even think about that in whenever this was, 1990, um, because you just wouldn't think about it because that was the whole thing to get a nice pair of Nike tennis shoes and all
All
the
the
creature
rage.
comfort.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the rage and whatever. But I went back to, and it helped me. There was also an event. I was sitting on that bench and I looked up at a tree and there was a power line in a tree, or yeah, tree growing into the power line. And I thought somebody's got to, trim that, whatever, because again, that'll ground out the power line. And so, so anyhow, I just uh, went ran through my mind. So I went home that night and I grabbed a voltmeter and a static meter and I made a 30-foot long ground cord and I connected it to a ground rod. I stuck it in the earth, took it in the house, connected it to a meter, and then I would take the probe on the meter and walk around and I'd measure all these electrical charges on my body, mostly static electricity, anywhere from 1,000 to 10,000 volts of static charge, just walking across your living room floor when the air is very dry. If there's a lot of moisture, then you don't necessarily notice it. But but every season you go through all these areas where you have high static charges, and they can cause all kinds of havoc, in I mean, that's why we have clean rooms that are there's electrically clean, meaning there's no static electricity, no noise. And so so I threw the wire and then I walked around and the safest thing in the home was the refrigerator because it was at earth potential because I was measuring it against the earth. The refrigerator, the appliances, but if I went towards the TV set, it would go way up. These were the old, not our modern TVs. They're a lot lower than they were back 30 years ago. But but anyhow, but lamps were the worst. Uh, a lamp in the corner, you're sitting down on the couch and here's a lamp sitting next to you. Well, it's not grounded, and so it's putting out a huge electric field. And then the couch itself, every time you get up or down, you're creating static electricity up and down on it. It's like when you roll over in bed. Some nights you can actually lift your feet and see the static electricity. Um, but these are things that people don't think about. But with my background, I always thought about it. So it's second nature to me. But anyhow, so that night or later in that day, I went to the hardware. I don't know. I went up to my bedroom and checked. The electric fields were the highest in my bedroom because it was an upstairs bedroom. I mean, they were extremely high. They were like 5 times higher than they were downstairs. So I went to the hardware store and I bought myself a roll of 3-inch wide metal duct tape. So it was conductive. And I laid it across my bed. I took an alligator clip and clipped that 30-foot wire to that, and then threw the wire out the window, connected it to a ground rod, actually 2 ground rods, one for the meter, one for the tape. And then I would take the meter in my hand and go lay on the tape, and my body would go to zero, just like if I were standing outdoors barefoot on the earth. Well, I grew up that way, so there's something I didn't understand any of it. I just thought, wow, this is really crazy.
You
So,
were measuring it. Did
but
it feel any different?
during life, no, you don't measure, but we can put you on a biofeedback equipment and ground you, and you can see the discharge, and the skin resistance and so on.
Sorry, I interrupted. Yeah, please continue.
Yeah, no, that's okay. But here's how I felt it. So I laid that tape across my bed, and I had the voltmeter in my hand, and I was measuring it against the earth, and I was at zero. And all of a sudden, the next thing I knew, it was morning, and I was like 53 years old, something like that. And again, lots of pain, lots of crazy health, just cowboy pain, I guess. And anyhow, I woke up in the morning. I said, "What the hell is this?" She says, "I don't ever sleep. I have to take Advil. I have to take pain pills. I have to do something in order to go sleep. I have to keep the TV on to distract myself, so I can go to sleep."
Hmm.
And that's pretty much a routine, for me it was anyway. And so I thought, wow, this is wild. So I did it for a couple more nights. Same thing. As long as I was on that tape, I would fall asleep and I would sleep better. So then I had a couple of friends that I had met in Sedona, and I said, they were about my age. And I said, you guys need to try this because there's not a lot to do, except entertain each other. So anyhow, I went over and did the same thing with one of my friends, and then the next day another one. And I asked him, just let me know what you're experiencing. And I just told him, I said, if you can't sleep, this is the greatest thing I've ever come across in my life. And so a couple, 3 days later, one guy called and he said, do you think this could have anything to do with arthritis? And I said, no, I don't think so. And he said, well, but my arthritis has come way down. And then all of a sudden, the light bulb went off. My own pain, had come way down, and I didn't have to take the Advil to go to sleep.
Hey there, Inspired Evolutionary. If you absolutely loved this, well, then here's a full conversation with this guest on the Inspired Evolution podcast. Check it out now.